Today's video will be about details that don't fully connect in the Chris Watts case. Moments that still feel unresolved. This video is not about defending Chris Watts. And it is not about accusing anyone else. This is about the unanswered questions that remain, and why they still matter. Shannon Watts was reported missing on August 13, 2018. Very quickly, attention turned to her husband, Chris. And in the days that followed, the narrative solidified into something almost absolute. A violent, controlling, explosive man who snapped. But one of the first things that raises questions is a claim made by a neighbor, that screaming or fighting had been heard coming from the Watts home. If Chris and Shannon had a volatile, aggressive relationship, why did so few people ever describe it that way before the murders? Shannon was incredibly open about her life. She posted constantly. She spoke daily to friends, family, co-workers, and people in her Thrive network. Yet there is no clear record of Shannon telling her parents or close friends that Chris was physically aggressive, threatening, or prone to screaming fits. That doesn't mean their marriage was healthy. Financial stress, emotional distance, resentment, and relationship breakdown were very real. But there is a difference between a strained marriage and one marked by regular violent outbursts. If screaming arguments were common, why didn't more neighbors report them? Why didn't Shannon confide in her mother, her father, or her closest friends about being afraid of Chris? It raises the possibility that what was heard may have been isolated, misinterpreted, or remembered differently once the outcome became known. And that matters, because after a crime, memories often reshape themselves to fit the ending. Another moment that still raises questions happens almost immediately, when police arrive at the Watts home to conduct a welfare check. Chris Watts is visibly nervous. He is pacing. He is talking excessively. And he is texting on his phone. Who exactly was Chris texting while police were standing inside his house? We know his phone activity was significant during that window. We also know that not all communications from that period were clearly retrieved or publicly detailed. Was he texting family? Was he texting co-workers? Was he texting Nicole Kessinger? And if so, why is there still ambiguity around that? In missing persons cases, early communications are critical. They often reveal panic, coordination, reassurance seeking, or attempts to control information. When those communications are unclear or unavailable, speculation naturally fills the gap, not because people want conspiracies, but because transparency feels incomplete. Another detail that often gets overlooked involves Shannon herself noticing that Chris was deleting text messages, specifically messages from his father. Why would messages between Chris and his father be deleted at all? Shannon reportedly mentioned this to friends, which suggests it concerned her enough to notice a pattern. Did Chris's father know about Nicole Kessinger? Was the affair discussed within his family? Was information being hidden deliberately? There has been speculation that Nicole may have been saved under another contact name, possibly Dad, though there is no confirmed evidence of this. But even without that theory, the act of deleting messages, especially selectively, suggests secrecy that extended beyond the affair itself. Then there is the phone call Chris made to his mother after Shannon was reported missing. He reportedly told her, "Mom, they are searching the house." Her response was calm, almost reassuring. What stands out here is not just her reaction, but Chris's tone. Why would someone be alarmed that police were searching their home when their pregnant wife and children were missing? For most people, a police search represents help. It represents urgency. It represents hope. For Chris, it appeared to represent danger. That phone call feels less like an update and more like a moment of panic, as though he needed reassurance, grounding, or emotional regulation. It raises the uncomfortable question of whether, in that moment, Chris already knew there was something to be found. Another aspect of this case that receives very little attention is Chris Watts' social world. Who were his friends? Outside of co-workers, very few people ever described themselves as close to Chris. No childhood best friends speaking publicly. No long-time confidants. No one stepping forward to say they truly knew him deeply. He appeared socially isolated, emotionally contained, and highly compartmentalized. That matters, because people who live double lives often do so more easily when they lack strong external accountability. Without close friendships, there are fewer mirrors reflecting who you really are, and fewer people noticing when something shifts. Chris Watts is frequently described as violent, aggressive, or psychopathic. But here is a deeply unsettling fact. There is no documented history of violence before the murders. No criminal record. No domestic violence reports. No restraining orders. No former classmates, co-workers, or acquaintances coming forward to say he was physically aggressive or dangerous. Even after his incarceration, there are no widely reported incidents of violent behavior in prison. That does not lessen what he did. But it complicates the narrative. Was Chris Watts a lifelong violent individual hiding in plain sight? Or was he someone who collapsed psychologically under pressure, secrecy, emotional detachment, and obsession? That distinction matters, because the second possibility is far more disturbing. It suggests that extreme violence does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides behind compliance, passivity, and silence. It also raises questions about how easily society labels people as monsters after the fact, because monsters feel safer than reality. Reality suggests that someone can appear ordinary, non-threatening, and even kind, until something inside them fractures completely. The Chris Watts case continues to haunt people not just because of the crime, but because of how normal everything appeared before it happened. And perhaps the most unsettling part of this case isn't what we know, but what we still don't. Because unanswered questions linger long after confessions are made. They linger in the moments that don't quite fit. In the behaviors that feel inconsistent. In the silences where clarity should exist. And asking those questions does not dishonor the victims. Shannon Watts, Bella, and Celeste deserve to be remembered not just as part of a shocking story, but as lives lost to a tragedy that should never have happened. Understanding how and why something like this occurred is not about blame. It is about awareness. Because cases like this don't begin with violence. They begin with secrecy. With emotional detachment. With lives lived in compartments. And sometimes, the most dangerous warning sign is the absence of any warning at all. Thank you for watching The Midnight Cult. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with my latest true crime videos.